Welcome to my channel, the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The detonation shook the rust bone before the sound reached it. A deep, grinding rumble that traveled through rock and metal, rattling bottles on shelves and making the patrons grip their tables. Dust drifted down from the ceiling in pale sheets. No one looked up. On Greta's 9, explosions were just the moon breathing. Jack Traynor sat at the bar's far corner, his back to the wall, eyes half closed. The whiskey in front of him was cheap and tasted like solvent. He'd ordered it because it was the only thing he could afford that might make him forget the last job. 3 weeks ago, a smuggling run gone wrong, 2 crew members dead because he'd hesitated at the wrong moment. Their faces came to him in the dark, in the silence between explosions. He raised his glass, studying the amber liquid in the dim light. The bar stank of unwashed bodies, burnt metal, and something organic rotting in the ventilation system. Miners, smugglers, and mercenaries of every species drank like tomorrow would never come. Miners crowded the tables, their overalls stained black with ore dust. Smugglers played cards in the corner, hands never far from weapons. A Vryn mercenary, massive, gray skin, with tusks that curved from his lower jaw, sat alone, eating something that still moved. Jack drained half the glass and set it down hard. "I'd marry the ugliest woman in this bar," he said, loud enough to cut through the noise, "as long as she could hold a rifle straight." The laughter started immediately. Crude, rough, the kind of laughter men used to pretend they weren't scared of dying in the mines tomorrow. Someone threw a bottle cap at him. He didn't flinch, but the laughter died fast. A shadow rose from the back of the room, unfolding like something ancient waking. 4 arms, each one thick as a man's torso, scarred from a lifetime of violence. The figure stepped into the light, and Jack felt his stomach drop. Xander. Everyone on Greta's 9 knew the name. Gladiator, champion of the arena circuits on 6 different worlds. Retired now, but the kind of retired that meant he'd killed enough people to earn peace. His face was a map of old battles. Scars crossing scars, one eye milky white, the other burning with a fury that never quite died. He wore simple clothes, but his forearms moved with a precision that made Jack think of weapons being loaded. Xander crossed the room in 5 strides. His lower right hand slammed onto Jack's table, making the whiskey jump. His upper left hand pointed at Jack's face. "You mean it, human?" His voice was gravel scraped across iron. "You want a warrior, woman?" Jack forced himself to meet that burning eye. "Just making conversation. Then make it somewhere else." Xander leaned closer. His breath smelled like copper. "You want a warrior? Beat me first. My daughter doesn't belong to anyone who hasn't bled for her." The bar had gone completely silent. Even the ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. Xander's upper right hand moved to his wrist, where a thick metal bracelet sat. Dark alloy engraved with symbols Jack didn't recognize. The gladiator twisted it off and dropped it onto the table. It hit with a sound like a hammer on an anvil. "Dawn," Xander said. "The arena. You wear this, you fight me. If you survive, you meet her." Jack stared at the bracelet. It was a challenge token. He'd seen them before, in the underground fight circuits. Wearing it meant accepting. Refusing meant leaving Greta's 9 in disgrace. If you were lucky enough to leave at all, he should have kept his mouth shut, should have drunk in silence like always. But the whiskey was working now, and the faces of the dead crew members were still there, and he was so tired of running from consequences. Jack picked up the bracelet. It was heavier than it looked. He slid it onto his wrist. The metal was warm, like it had a pulse. Xander smiled, a terrible thing that showed broken teeth. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "If you survive, you'll see why she hides her face." Then he turned and walked out, all 4 arms swinging in perfect rhythm. The bar erupted in noise. Shouts, bets being placed, arguments breaking out. Jack sat frozen, the bracelet tight around his wrist, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. Someone grabbed his shoulder. He spun, hand going to the knife at his belt, but it was just the bartender, a thin woman with cybernetic eyes that glowed faint blue. "You're dead," she said flatly. "Xander hasn't lost in 20 years. Thanks for the encouragement. I'm serious. He crushed a Vryn mercenary's skull last month. The guy weighed 400 pounds and had combat augments." She poured him another drink. this one on the house. Why'd you do it? Jack stared at the whiskey. Seemed like a good idea at the time. You humans, she muttered, walking away. All the same, suicidal and calling it bravery. He sat there for another hour, drinking slowly, feeling the weight of the bracelet. The explosions continued, rhythmic and distant. Gratis 9 was being hollowed out, one detonation at a time, its valuable ores shipped to the core worlds while the miners breathed poison and died young. It was a terrible place, but it was honest in its terribleness. No one pretended things were better than they were. Eventually he left. Outside, the moon's thin atmosphere made everything sharp and cold. The sky was black, filled with stars that didn't care. The arena loomed on the horizon, a massive structure of scaffolding and welded metal, built directly over an old mining pit. Tomorrow he'd fight there. Tomorrow he'd probably die there. But tonight he needed to understand what he'd gotten himself into. The arena district was a maze of temporary structures, equipment sheds, fighter barracks, betting shops, medical tents that doubled as morgues. Jack moved through the shadows, the bracelet marking him. People saw it and stepped aside. A few made religious gestures. One woman spat at his feet. He found the fighter entrance and slipped inside. The interior was all concrete and exposed pipes, lit by harsh fluorescent panels that flickered. Somewhere deeper in, he heard impacts, fists on heavy bags, feet on stone. Training. He followed the sound down a long corridor. The walls were covered in faded posters from old fights, faces of champions long dead. At the end of the corridor was an open door, light spilling out. Jack stopped in the doorway. The training room was vast, filled with equipment that looked older than the moon itself. And in the center, moving through a combat form, was someone he assumed must be Lyra. She was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with blue skin that had a slight metallic sheen under the lights. She wore simple training clothes, black and form-fitting. Her movements were perfect, each strike and block flowing into the next with a precision that made Jack's military training look clumsy. She was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, sharp, purposeful, dangerous. Then she turned, and he saw her face. Scars. Deep, deliberate scars that ran from her hairline down to her jaw, crossing her features in patterns that looked almost ritualistic. 3 scars crossed her left eye. 2 more bisected her lips. Her nose had been broken and healed wrong. The scars were old, silvered with time, but they dominated everything else about her. They were meant to. She saw him and stopped mid-strike. Her eyes, gray, like storm clouds, fixed on him with an intensity that made him want to step back. "You're the human," she said. Her voice was surprisingly soft, but there was something broken in it. "The one who accepted my father's challenge?" Jack nodded, not trusting his voice. She walked toward him, each step deliberate. Up close, he could see the scars even more clearly. They were precise, surgical, not the result of battle. Someone had done this to her on purpose. "Your father's a legend," Jack managed. "He's a curse." She stopped 3 feet away, arms crossed. Her fingers tightened against her biceps. "These scars are my punishment for losing." The words hit him like a fist. He'd seen a lot of cruelty in his years as a soldier and mercenary, but this, a father scarring his own daughter, this was different. "On Earth," he said carefully, "scars mean you survived." Her laugh was bitter. She turned slightly, exposing the full map of damage across her face. "You humans, you call survival glory so you don't have to feel guilt." She turned away, moving to a bench where a towel and water bottle waited. "My father was teaching me to fight. I was 14. I lost a match in the junior circuits. Lost badly. He said I dishonored him. That night he held me down and carved my face. Said every time I looked in a mirror, I'd remember that losing has consequences." Jack felt something cold settle in his chest. Don't." She cut him off, her back still to him, her shoulders tensed. "Don't pity me. Don't tell me it's wrong. I know what it is. I've lived with it for 16 years. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere distant, another explosion shook the moon. Jack stepped closer. "Why do you make the challenge? If he did that to you, why does he care who you end up with?" Lyra picked up the towel, wiping her face slowly. When she turned back, her expression was unreadable. Her jaw worked as if chewing on words she didn't want to speak. "Because he's realized what he did," she said quietly. "Too late, but he's realized. And now he thinks if he finds me someone strong enough, someone brave enough to face him, that somehow makes up for it. She met his eyes. It doesn't. But he's dying, so I let him believe it might. Dying? Bone cancer. From the arena years, too many hits, too much damage. He has maybe a year. She sat down on the bench, suddenly looking exhausted. Her hands opened and closed on her knees. He wants me married before he goes, wants to believe I'll be safe. As if any of this has ever been about safety. Jack moved to sit beside her, careful to leave space between them. You could just leave. Find someone on your own terms. Could I? She looked at him, and for a moment he saw past the scars, past the armor, to something raw and tired underneath. I've been his daughter for 30 years. His project. His failure. I don't know who I am without that. Her voice dropped. And the truth is, I'm scared to find out. They sat in silence. The training room felt very small suddenly, despite its size. Tomorrow, Lyra said finally, he's going to try to kill you. Not just beat you, kill you. Because if you're not strong enough to survive him, you're not strong enough for me. That's how he thinks. And you. She looked at the scars on her hands. Smaller ones, from training, from real fights. I think anyone who'd wear that bracelet for a stupid joke is either brave or insane. Maybe both. Maybe that's the same thing. She stood moving toward the door. Get some rest. If you're still alive tomorrow night, we can talk more. She was almost gone when Jack spoke again. The torchlight, he said. She stopped but didn't turn. In the torchlight, for a second, I didn't see the scars. I saw you, just you. For several heartbeats, Lyra stood frozen in the doorway. Then without a word, she left. Jack sat alone in the training room for a long time after that, the weight of the bracelet on his wrist feeling heavier with each passing moment. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he walked the moon's surface, following the maintenance roads between mining operations. The explosions continued, each one lighting up the darkness for brief moments. He thought about his military service, about the people he'd failed to save, about the easy way he'd accepted death as an outcome for himself, but kept running from the guilt of others dying because of his choices. Dawn came slowly on Grados 9, a gradual lightening of the black sky to deep gray. No sun, just the distant star that Grados 9 orbited, its light weak and cold. Jack made his way back to the arena as the first shift of miners emerged from the tunnels, their headlamps bobbing in the gloom. The arena was already filling. Word had spread fast, a human challenging Xander. People came from all over the mining district, taking time from their shifts, spending money they didn't have on betting slips. The stands were a chaotic mix of species and classes, all united by their hunger for violence. Nothing? The tech was a small insectoid creature with too many eyes. Not even basic combat mods. You're going to die quickly, human. Probably, Jack agreed. They gave him a fighter's kit. Thin armor, pads for knees and elbows, a mouthguard, a rusty sword that looked like it had killed a dozen men before him and might kill a dozen more after. He kept Xander's bracelet on his wrist. Under the fluorescent light, the metal caught a strange reflection. A bright, sharp glint. He'd seen that kind of shine before, on scopes and sights. It never ended well. The holding area was a concrete box with one small window looking out onto the arena floor. Jack watched as the crowd grew louder, felt the vibrations of their stamping feet through the floor. This was what people came to Grados 9 for. Not the mining, not the work, but this. The chance to see someone die in a way that meant something, even if that something was just entertainment. The door opened. A handler, human, surprisingly, gestured him forward. You're up. Try to make it interesting. Jack followed him down a tunnel that sloped upward. The roar of the crowd grew louder with each step. At the end of the tunnel was a gate, and beyond the gate was light, noise, violence. The gate rose. Jack stepped into the arena, and the world became sound and fury. The space was massive, a circle of packed sand 50 meters across, surrounded by walls of welded scrap metal 20 feet high. Above that, the stands rose in tiers, packed with bodies. The noise was physical, pressing against him from all sides. The sky above was still that dead gray, uncaring. Across the arena, another gate was rising. Xander emerged, and the crowd went insane. The gladiator had stripped down to minimal clothing, revealing the full extent of his scarred body. All four arms were wrapped in combat tape. His legs were like tree trunks. He moved into the center of the arena with the confidence of someone who'd never lost here, who'd never even imagined losing here. Jack walked forward, sword held loosely in one hand. The sand was deeper than he'd expected, shifting under his feet. He could see dark stains in it, old blood probably from fights that had ended badly. They stopped 10 feet apart. Xander's milky eye fixed on Jack, while the good eye tracked his movements, calculating, measuring. "Last chance," Xander said, his voice carrying despite the crowd. "Walk away. Die old somewhere else." Jack adjusted his grip on the sword. The bracelet on his wrist caught the light again, that same sharp glint. "Your daughter told me you're dying anyway. Why'd you want to beat up a stranger before you go?" Something flickered across Xander's face. Surprise, maybe, or anger. His upper arms flexed. "She told you that?" "She told me a lot of things." Jack shifted his weight, feeling the sand beneath him. "Like how you gave her those scars." The crowd noise changed, sensing something deeper than a simple challenge fight. Xander's face went very still. "That's not—" He stopped, all four hands clenching into fists. "That's not your business." "You made it my business when you threw that bracelet at me." Xander moved then, faster than something his size should be able to move. All four arms came at Jack from different angles, creating a wall of fists that gave him nowhere to go. Jack dove forward under the attacks, rolling through sand and coming up inside Xander's reach. He brought the sword around in a wild arc, not trying to kill, just trying to create space. The blade skittered off Xander's ribs, drawing a thin line of blood but doing no real damage. Xander's lower left hand caught Jack's shoulder, spun him, and threw him 15 feet through the air. Jack hit the sand hard, his vision going white for a moment. He tasted blood, rolled instinctively as Xander's foot slammed down where his head had been. The crowd roared approval. This was what they wanted, the small human trying to survive against impossible odds. Jack scrambled to his feet, sword somehow still in his hand. Xander circled him, all four arms moving in hypnotic patterns, feints within feints. The gladiator was playing with him, extending the fight for entertainment value. "You don't deserve her," Xander said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You're weak, slow, human." Jack spat blood into the sand. "Yeah, well, you scarred your daughter's face, so I'm not taking parenting advice from you." Xander's charge was pure rage. No technique now, just four arms trying to crush, tear, destroy. Jack couldn't match him for strength, couldn't match him for reach. He had one advantage. Xander was angry, and angry fighters made mistakes. Jack waited until the last possible moment, then dropped flat. Xander stumbled over him, all that momentum carrying him forward. Jack rolled, bringing the sword up in a vicious arc that caught Xander's lower right calf. The blade bit deep this time. Xander roared, pain and fury mixed together, and crashed to one knee. The crowd noise reached a fever pitch. But Jack had made his own mistake. He was too close. Xander's upper left arm shot out, catching him around the throat, lifting him off the ground. The world started going dark immediately. "You think you know me?" Xander's face was inches away, that milky eye staring into Jack's soul. "You think one conversation with my daughter makes you understand anything?" Jack couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. His vision was narrowing to a tunnel, Xander's face at the end of it. He could see the scars on the gladiator's face, each one a story of violence survived. Could see behind the rage something else, regret, shame, the look of a man who knew he'd broken something he could never fix. Jack stopped fighting the grip, stopped trying to pry the hand away from his throat. Instead, he grabbed Xander's wrist with both hands and squeezed, not trying to break free, but trying to communicate something through touch alone. Their eyes met. Jack mouthed three words, no air behind them, but clear enough. "You broke her." Xander's grip loosened, just a fraction, just enough for Jack to gasp a single breath. The crowd booed, sensing their entertainment slipping away. They wanted death, clean and simple. But something was happening in the sand that transcended violence. Jack spoke, his voice crushed but audible. "Every move you make, it's hers. Her precision, twisted into your strength. You didn't teach her. You stole from her." Xander dropped him. Jack collapsed to the sand, gasping, his throat on fire. But he forced himself to look up, to keep his eyes on the gladiator's face. Xander stood frozen, all four arms hanging at his sides. The crowd's booing grew louder, angrier. They'd paid for death. They felt cheated. "You're not fighting me," Jack managed, getting to his knees. "You're fighting your guilt." For 5 seconds, the arena held its breath. Then Xander moved, but not toward Jack. The gladiator turned, looking up at something above the crowd. His good eye narrowed. Jack followed his gaze, and his stomach dropped. High above the arena, in a private viewing box made of reinforced glass, stood a figure in expensive clothes. Murloc, the arena's owner, a fat man with cybernetic eyes that gleamed red in the gray light. And next to him, barely visible, was someone else. Someone in tactical gear, holding a long-barreled weapon. A sniper. Jack had seen that setup before. Different planet, different circumstances, same result. One of his unit members had died in an accident during a demonstration fight, killed by a stray shot that was anything but stray. The organizers had wanted to up the stakes, make it more interesting. The shine of the scope, the precise angle, the plausible deniability afterward. Murloc was smirking, even from this distance. His hand was raised, ready to signal. In the stands, Jack saw movement. Lyra pushing through the crowd, her scarred face turned upward toward the viewing box. She saw it too. Her mouth opened, probably shouting a warning, but the crowd's angry noise swallowed whatever she said. The sniper adjusted his scope, the barrel tracking downward toward the arena floor. Toward Xander, who still stood frozen, back to the viewing box, vulnerable. The metal caught light, that same bright, cutting reflection Jack had seen on his bracelet. The kind that always meant death was close. Jack's mind raced. Murloc wanted a death, wanted the spectacle. If both fighters walked away from this, the arena lost its mystique, its danger. But if the legendary Xander died, killed by the human challenger, the story would spread across a dozen worlds. People would flock here. Money would flow. Xander had no idea. He was still staring at Jack, wrestling with his own demons, unaware that in seconds he'd be dead. Time crystallized. Jack could almost see the bullet's path, the way it would punch through Xander's spine, the way the gladiator would drop, the way the crowd would erupt. Could see Lyra's face in the aftermath. See her scarred features twisting with loss on top of loss. Could see himself, walking away, telling himself it wasn't his fault, adding another face to the collection of people he'd failed to save. Memory hit him like a physical blow. Sergeant Kovac, 23 years old, dying in the demonstration fight. Jack had seen the glint of the scope, had known what was coming, had frozen, told himself it wasn't his responsibility, that if he acted, he might make things worse. And Kovac had died, and Jack had carried that moment with him every day since. Not this time. The sniper's finger tightened on the trigger. Jack saw the micro movements, the practiced precision. He moved. 3 strides across the sand, all his momentum carried forward. Xander saw him coming, all 4 arms rising defensively, thinking this was another attack. But Jack wasn't aiming for Xander. He was aiming past him, through him. The shot cracked, a sound like the world breaking. Jack hit Xander full force, driving them both down into the sand. Something punched through his left shoulder, spinning him sideways. Metal and bone shattered. Pain came in a white wave that made everything else disappear for a moment. When his vision cleared, he was on the ground. Blood spreading through the sand beneath him. Xander was underneath him, all 4 arms wrapped around Jack's body, holding him, protecting him from the follow-up shot that never came. The crowd had gone silent, not even silent, shocked into a stillness that was louder than any cheering. Then someone screamed, and the stillness broke. Lyra was there suddenly, sliding to her knees beside them, her hands already moving to Jack's shoulder. Her face was inches from his, those gray eyes wide with something that might have been fear. Sand sprayed from her impact. "Why?" she was shouting, but her voice sounded distant, underwater. Her fingers pressed hard against the wound. "You could have walked away. You could have just—" "I did," Jack managed. The pain was extraordinary, but he needed to get the words out. Blood filled his mouth. "Every time, from people I could have saved." His vision was narrowing again, but different from when Xander had been choking him. This was softer, darker, pulling him down. He could feel blood pumping out of his shoulder in rhythm with his heartbeat. could feel his body going cold. But he could also feel Xander's arms around him, feel the gladiator's huge hands putting pressure on the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. Could feel Lyra's touch on his face, surprisingly gentle despite the urgency. Her palm was warm against his cheek. "Stay with me," she was saying over and over. "Stay with me." Jack looked past her, up at the viewing box. Murloc was gone, the window empty, the sniper too. Disappeared like they'd never been there, because that's how these things worked. Plausible deniability, accidental discharge, tragic incident. But everyone had seen. The whole crowd had seen Jack tackle Xander, had seen him take a bullet meant for the gladiator. The story would spread anyway, just not the one Murloc had wanted. Xander's face appeared above him, blocking out the gray sky. The gladiator's good eye was wet, tears cutting tracks through the blood and sand on his cheeks. His milky eye was just as wet. "You didn't fight for victory," Xander said, his voice breaking. "You fought for life." Jack tried to respond, but his throat wasn't working right. Blood was filling his mouth. He coughed, tasted copper, wondered if this was it. If after all the running, all the guilt, all the faces in the dark, this was where his story ended. Lyra's face replaced her father's, her hands on either side of Jack's head, forcing him to look at her. "Don't you dare," she said, and there was something fierce in her voice that cut through the fog. "Don't you dare die on me, not after that. Not after choosing this." Medical personnel were arriving, rushing across the sand with a stretcher, emergency equipment. Jack could hear them shouting medical jargon, could feel hands on his body, checking vitals, applying pressure, preparing to move him. But before they did, Xander's hand closed around his uninjured shoulder. The gladiator's grip was firm but careful, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that went beyond words. His milky eye was wet. "Teach her," Xander said. "Teach her what you just showed me." He paused, struggling with something. His throat worked. "Teach her that some things are worth bleeding for. Once you heal." Lyra's hand covered her father's. Then both of them rested their hands on Jack's chest, over his heart. Blood, Jack's blood, covered all of them, mixing, binding them together in a moment that felt outside time. Her fingers spread across the fabric of his shirt. The medics lifted Jack onto the stretcher. The world tilted, spun, threatened to disappear entirely. But through it all, he kept his eyes open, kept his gaze locked on the two figures standing above him. Father and daughter, warrior and survivor. Two people bound by violence and regret, and now somehow bound to him as well. The stretcher moved, carrying him toward the tunnel, toward medical help, toward either survival or the end. Jack didn't know which. But for the first time in years, he wasn't running from the outcome. He'd made a choice. He'd bled for it. And whatever came next, that choice was his. The crowd had found its voice again, but the tone was different now. Not bloodlust, not entertainment, something closer to awe or respect or fear. They'd come to see death, and they'd seen something else instead. Something harder to name but impossible to forget. Jack's eyes closed despite his efforts to keep them open. The pain was fading now, replaced by a floating sensation that was either blood loss or shock or both. He could hear Lyra's voice, still talking to him, still telling him to stay, but the words were losing meaning. His last conscious thought was of her face, not the scars, not the damage, but the expression underneath. In the torchlight of the training room, he'd seen something real. In the arena sand, covered in blood, he'd seen it again. And he thought maybe if he survived this, he'd like to see what else was there. Then the darkness took him, and for a while, there was nothing. Time passed in fragments. Pain, voices, machines beeping, the smell of antiseptic, hands on his body, impersonal and efficient. Surgery, probably. Multiple surgeries. His shoulder was gone, or felt gone, replaced by a void of fire. Once he surfaced enough to see a figure sitting beside his bed. Blue skin, scars catching the light. But when he tried to speak, the darkness pulled him back under. Days blurred together, or weeks, or hours. It was impossible to tell in the medical bay, where the lights never changed and the pain was the only constant. But eventually, inevitably, Jack woke up. The medical bay was small, cramped, filled with outdated equipment that hummed and beeped in arrhythmic patterns. Jack lay on a narrow bed, His left shoulder wrapped in so many bandages he looked half mummified. The pain was still there, but distant now, muted by drugs. Lyra sat in a chair beside the bed, her head tilted back against the wall, eyes closed. She'd been there a while, judging by the exhaustion on her face. Her clothes were different, cleaner but still practical. Fighter's clothes, ready for violence at any moment. Jack tried to sit up, and the movement sent a spike of pain through his shoulder that made his vision white out. He gasped, falling back against the pillows. His breath came in sharp bursts. Lyra's eyes snapped open. She was on her feet instantly, leaning over him, checking the monitors, adjusting something on the IV line. Her movements were precise, practiced. "Easy," she said. "Don't move. You're still—" She stopped, seeming to realize she was touching him, her hands on his good shoulder and his chest. She pulled back, but not far. Her fingertips lingered. "You're still healing." "How long?" Jack's voice was a rasp, barely recognizable. 8 days. You crashed twice on the table. Lost most of the blood in your body. The doctors said—" She looked away, her jaw tightening. "They said you shouldn't have made it." Jack managed a weak smile. "Disappointing a lot of people seems to be my specialty." Lyra didn't smile back. Instead, she sat down hard, like her legs had given out, and put her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook once, then went still. Her breathing was uneven. "You could have died," she said, her voice muffled. "For him, for us, for a stupid challenge in a bar. You could have died. But I didn't. That's not the point." She looked up and her eyes were red. "The point is, you chose to. You saw that scope, you knew what was coming, and you chose to take the bullet anyway. That's—" She struggled for words. "That's insane. That's the kind of thing people do in bad stories. Real people don't do that." Jack shifted carefully, testing his body's limits. Everything hurt, but in a way that suggested it would eventually stop hurting. That was progress. His fingers flexed against the sheets. "When I was in the military," he said slowly, "I served with a guy named Kovac. Good soldier. Good person. We were doing a demonstration fight for some visiting dignitaries, and someone decided it would be more interesting if things went wrong. I saw the sniper, saw the whole setup, and I froze." He swallowed. "Told myself it wasn't my problem, that if I acted I might make things worse. Kovac died in front of 3,000 people, and I stood there and watched, and I've carried that with me every day since." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Her hands dropped from her face. "So this was guilt, penance?" "No." Jack met her eyes. "It was a choice. Your father was vulnerable. You would have watched him die, and I had already spent too many years living with faces in the dark. I didn't want to add yours to the collection." Something shifted in her expression. A crack in the armor, something soft and uncertain pushing through. She leaned forward slightly. "My father came to see you," she said, "while you were under. Multiple times. He'd sit where I'm sitting and just stare at you, like he couldn't believe you were real." She paused. Her hand moved to her pocket. "Before he left the last time, he removed his war bracelet, the one you wore into the arena. He left it here." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the metal bracelet, setting it on the bed beside Jack's hand. Under the medical bay's harsh lights, he could see the engravings more clearly. They weren't decorative. They were names. Dozens of names inscribed in tiny letters around the metal's circumference. "Everyone he's killed in the arena," Lyra explained. Her finger traced one name, then another. "He carries them with him, won't let himself forget." She touched the bracelet lightly. "He said to tell you that you fought for life, not victory, and that means more than any championship he ever won." Jack picked up the bracelet with his good hand, feeling its weight. "Where is he now?" "Dying, like I said." Lyra's voice went flat. "The cancer's accelerating. The doctors give him 3 months, maybe 4. He's spending it watching old fight recordings and pretending he has regrets. He does have regrets. Having them isn't the same as earning forgiveness." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "You saved his life. That doesn't erase what he did to me. Doesn't change the fact that every morning I wake up, and the first thing I see in the mirror is his handiwork." Jack set the bracelet down. "No, it doesn't, and I'm not asking you to forgive him." But what?" She stood abruptly, pacing the small space. "But I should try? But family matters?" But he's my father, and I owe him something. Each question came faster, angrier. I've spent 16 years owing him success because I failed, owing him perfection because I'm damaged, owing him my whole life because he gave it to me and never let me forget it. But you're still here, Jack said quietly, still training, still living in his shadow. If you really wanted to be free of him, you'd be on a transport to anywhere else. Lyra stopped pacing, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You don't know anything about it, she said, but there was less conviction in her voice now. You're right, I don't. Jack tried to shift again, managed to prop himself up slightly. But I know what it's like to carry something heavy. And I know the difference between choosing to carry it and not knowing how to put it down. She turned to face him fully. And which one am I? I think you're trying to figure that out. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The medical equipment beeped. Somewhere in the facility, a door slammed. The moon trembled with another distant detonation. He wants to see you, Lyra said finally. When you're strong enough. He has something he wants to say. What about you? Jack asked. What do you want? She moved back to the chair, sitting down slowly. Her fingers traced the scars on her left hand. Unconscious gesture, habit born of years. I want to understand why you did it, she said. Not the guilt, not the redemption story. The real reason. In that moment, when you saw the scope, what made you move? Jack thought about it, really thought about it. The drugs were wearing off enough that his mind was clearing, and he could remember the arena with sharp detail. The sand, the crowd, the glint of metal. Xander's back. Lyra's face in the stands. I saw your face, he said. In the crowd, you were looking up at the viewing box, and you knew what was about to happen. And I thought, if I don't move, she's going to watch her father die. And whatever complicated, broken, terrible thing they have, she'll lose the chance to make it something else. Even if that something else is just closure, just an ending she chooses. He paused. Nobody should have to watch someone die and spend the rest of their life wondering if they could have stopped it. That weight, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Lyra's eyes were wet. She blinked rapidly, forcing the tears back. But they came anyway, sliding down her scarred cheeks in silver tracks. I hated him in that moment, she whispered, seeing him standing there, vulnerable, about to die. And I hated him. But I also, her voice broke, I also didn't want him to die like that. Shot in the back, murdered for entertainment. He's a bastard, but he deserved better than that. He deserves better than what he gave you, Jack said. But maybe that's not the point anymore. Maybe the point is what you deserve. She wiped her face roughly with her palm. And what do I deserve? A choice. Your own choice. Not your father's legacy or his guilt or his attempts at redemption. Just what you want. What you choose. Lyra laughed, but it was a broken sound. I don't even know what that would look like. I've been his daughter, his project, his failure for so long. Take that away, and what's left? You, Jack said simply. Whatever that is. She looked at him for a long time, her expression cycling through emotions too fast to name. Then she stood, moving toward the door. Get some rest, she said. The doctors say you need at least another week before you can walk. My father can wait that long. Lyra, she stopped, hand on the door frame, not turning. Thank you, Jack said, for sitting with me, for being here. She was quiet for several heartbeats. Then, you took a bullet for my father. Least I can do is make sure you survive it. She glanced back just for a moment. Besides, you said in the torchlight you saw me, just me. I want to know if that was the drugs talking or if you meant it. Before Jack could answer, she was gone. The days that followed took on a strange rhythm. Mornings were physical therapy, brutal sessions where a medical tech named Roar, who had too many limbs and no concept of mercy, forced Jack to move his shattered shoulder through exercises that made him see stars. Afternoons were rest, drugs, and the slow, grinding progress of healing. Evenings, Lyra came. She never stayed long at first, just 15 minutes, 20. She'd sit in the chair, ask how he was healing, share small details about the arena district, about the mining operations, about the moon's slow death. Safe topics, surface things. But gradually, the visits lengthened. An hour, 2. And the conversations went deeper. She told him about her childhood, how her father had been her hero once, before the scars, how she'd wanted to be just like him, strong and fearless and unbreakable, how the night he'd held her down and carved her face, something had broken in her that never healed right, just like her nose. I remember looking at him afterward, she said one evening, and thinking, this is my father, the person who's supposed to protect me, and he just turned me into a lesson. What was the lesson? Jack asked. That losing is unacceptable, that weakness has permanent consequences, that love isn't protection, it's expectation. She looked at her hands. For a long time I believed that, shaped my whole life around it. But lately, I don't know. Watching you take that bullet, that wasn't strength the way my father taught it. That was something else. It was stupid, Jack offered. Maybe, but it was also kind. And I think maybe those things aren't opposites. She met his eyes. My father never taught me kindness, just victory. Jack was quiet for a moment. Kindness is harder than victory. Victory's end. Kindness. You have to keep choosing it, every day. Is that what you're doing? Choosing kindness? I'm trying to choose something that isn't running away. On the 10th day, Jack walked for the first time. Roar supported him with 3 arms while he took shuffling steps around the medical bay. His shoulders screamed protest, the reconstructed muscle and bone not ready for this, but he needed to move, needed to prove to himself that the bullet hadn't ended him. Lyra was there, watching from the doorway. When he made it back to the bed without collapsing, she was smiling, just barely, just a small curve of her scarred lips. But it was there. Impressive, she said, for someone who was dead 8 days ago. I'm motivated, Jack said, gasping. By what? Your father. I need to be able to stand when I talk to him. The smile faded. You really want to see him? I think I need to, and I think maybe you need me to. She didn't deny it, just nodded slowly and said, tomorrow then, I'll take you to him. That night, Jack barely slept. The pain was manageable now, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. He kept thinking about Xander, the gladiator's face in the arena, the tears cutting through blood and sand. Kept thinking about the bracelet with its inscribed names, the weight of remembered violence. Kept thinking about what he'd say to a dying man who'd saved his daughter's life, but destroyed her face. Morning came gray and cold. Larry arrived early, carrying clothes, simple, worn, but clean. She helped him dress, her movements efficient and impersonal, not quite meeting his eyes. The shoulder barely cooperated, but together they got him into the shirt. He's at his home, Yishwinashum, Lyra said as they left the medical bay, on the edge of the arena district. Fair warning, it's not pleasant. Xander's home was a converted cargo container, welded to 3 others to create a space barely large enough for his massive frame. The interior was sparse. A bed, a table, shelves lined with old fight recordings and a few weapons that looked more ceremonial than functional. The air smelled of sickness and chemicals. The gladiator sat on his bed, and Jack almost didn't recognize him. In just 10 days, the cancer had consumed him. He'd lost weight, his 4 arms hanging thin and weak. His skin had taken on a grayish tone, but his eyes, one milky, one burning, were still sharp. The humans survive, Xander said, his voice a shadow of its former power. I wasn't certain you would. Jack lowered himself carefully into a chair. Lyra stood by the door, arms crossed, face unreadable. Takes more than a bullet to kill someone this stubborn, Jack said. Xander almost smiled. I've learned that. He shifted, grimacing with pain, and reached for something on the shelf beside his bed. When his hand came back, he was holding the war bracelet. You left this in the medical bay. Your daughter brought it to me. I thought maybe you wanted me to keep it. I do. Xander set it on the table between them. But first I need you to understand what it means. Those names, 53 of them. 53 lives I ended for sport, for money, for pride. I carry them so I never forget the cost of what I chose to be. And what did you choose to be? A weapon, nothing more. I was good at killing, so I killed. Made myself into something feared across 6 worlds. And I told myself it was strength, that it was power, that it meant something. He looked at his daughter. Then I tried to make her into the same thing. Another weapon, another killer, And when she couldn't be that, when she lost, I punished her for being human. Lyra's expression didn't change, but Jack saw her hands tighten on her arms. I can't undo what I did, Xander continued. Can't give her back the face I took. Can't return the childhood I destroyed. The best I can do is tell her the truth. I was wrong. Everything I taught her about strength was a lie I told myself to justify violence. You're dying, Lyra said from the doorway, her voice flat. Is this a deathbed confession? Looking for forgiveness so you can go peacefully? Xander's good eye fixed on her. No, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm telling you that you don't owe me anything anymore. Not your presence, not your time, not your grief when I'm gone. I'm severing the debt. You're free. Free? Lyra's laugh was bitter. You think saying that makes it real? You think I can just walk away and be someone else? No, Xander said quietly, but I'm giving you permission to try, and I'm giving you him. He gestured at Jack. Someone who understands that strength isn't about winning. It's about choosing what to protect. Jack shifted uncomfortably. I'm not a gift you can give. No, you're not, but you're a man who took a bullet for a stranger, who chose pain over safety, who fought for life instead of victory. Xander leaned forward, his breathing labored. Teach her that. Show her what I never could. That's all I'm asking. Not for me, for her. The container was silent except for Xander's harsh breathing and the distant rumble of mining operations. Jack looked at Lyra, saw the war happening behind her eyes, anger and grief and something that might have been hope, all tangled together. You don't get to rewrite this, Lyra said finally, her voice shaking. You don't get to be the noble father sacrificing for his daughter's happiness. You carved my face. You broke me, and now you're dying, and suddenly you want to be something else. I know. Xander's voice was barely a whisper. I know what I am, and I know I don't deserve redemption, but you deserve better than what I made you believe you were. And if me dying lets you see that, then maybe my death is the first useful thing I've done for you. Lyra was crying now, tears streaming down her scarred face, and she was shaking with the effort of holding herself together. I hate you, she said. I hate you so much. I know. And Her voice broke completely. And I don't want you to die. Xander stood, the movement clearly causing him agony, but he crossed to his daughter and wrapped all four arms around her. She fought him for a moment, then collapsed against his chest, sobbing in a way that sounded like something ancient and poisonous, finally breaking free. Jack looked away, giving them what privacy he could in the small space. He studied the fight recordings on the shelves, the weapons, the sparse evidence of a life built entirely around violence. Wondered what it must be like to reach the end and realize you'd constructed everything on a foundation of lies. When Lyra finally pulled away, her face was red and wet, and her scars stood out stark against her skin. But there was something different in her expression, something looser, like a knot had been cut. Xander turned back to Jack, moving slowly, each step an effort. He picked up the bracelet from the table and held it out. This is yours now, he said. You earned it. Not by fighting me, by teaching me. Jack took the bracelet, feeling its weight, feeling the names inscribed in the metal. What did I teach you? That some things are worth bleeding for. That choosing to protect someone, even when it costs you everything, is the only kind of strength that matters. Xander sat back down heavily on the bed. I spent my life proving I could beat anyone. You spent one moment proving you'd die for a stranger. Which one of us was strong? Jack slid the bracelet onto his wrist. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for him. I think maybe we're both just trying to be less broken than we were yesterday. Xander smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time since Jack had met him. Then maybe there's hope for all of us. They left an hour later. Xander was exhausted, the conversation having drained what little energy he had. But as they reached the door, the gladiator called out one more time. Lyra! She turned. I was wrong about you, he said. You were never a failure. You were always stronger than me. I just couldn't see it because I'd forgotten what strength looked like. She didn't respond, just nodded once and walked out into the gray light. They walked in silence for a long time, moving through the arena district's narrow streets. Around them, life continued. Miners heading to shifts, merchants selling questionable food, fighters training in open-air gyms. Gratos 9 didn't care about personal revelations. It just kept grinding forward, one explosion at a time. Finally, Lyra spoke. Do you think he meant it? About setting me free? Does it matter? She considered that. No, I suppose it doesn't. Whether he meant it or not, I still have to decide what I do next. And what do you want to do? She stopped walking, turned to face him. The mining district stretched out behind her. Ugly, harsh, honest. I want to leave, she said. I want to get on a transport and go somewhere no one knows my name, or my father's name, or what these scars mean. I want to find out who I am when I'm not performing for anyone. She paused. But I'm terrified, because what if I leave and discover there's nothing underneath? What if my father destroyed so much of me that there's nothing left to build from? Jack reached out with his good hand, not quite touching her, but close. Then you build from that, from the fear and the scars and the broken pieces. You don't need to be whole to start over. You just need to be willing. Is that what you're doing? Starting over? I'm trying. She looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. You know you can't save me, right? Whatever you think this is, gratitude for saving my father, some redemption story, you can't fix what's broken in me. I know. That's not my job. It's yours. Then what are you offering? Jack thought about it, about the faces in the dark, about running from consequences, about the moment in the arena when he'd chosen to bleed, about the long, difficult work of becoming someone who didn't hate what he saw in the mirror. Company, he said finally. Just company. Someone who understands that healing is ugly and nonlinear, and sometimes feels impossible. Someone who won't expect you to be perfect. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she took his hand. Her grip was strong, calloused from years of training. The scars on her fingers pressed against his palm. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Be with someone. Trust someone. Any of it. Neither do I, so we'll figure it out together. And probably mess it up a lot. She laughed, a real laugh this time, not bitter or broken. You really are crazy. Probably. But I took a bullet for your father, so I'm committed to the crazy at this point. They started walking again, still holding hands, moving through the district with no particular destination. Above them, the gray sky pressed down, indifferent and eternal. But somehow it didn't feel quite as oppressive as before. Over the following weeks, they fell into a new rhythm. Jack continued physical therapy, pushing his shoulder through the painful process of relearning movement. Lyra trained, but differently now. Not with her father's brutal efficiency, but exploring her own style, finding movements that felt natural rather than imposed. They talked. Long conversations that stretched through evenings, touching on everything from their childhoods to their fears, to their understanding of what strength really meant. Sometimes the conversations were difficult, hitting raw places that made them both retreat for a while. But they always came back. They kissed for the first time 3 weeks after the arena fight. It was awkward. Jack's shoulder was still healing, and Lyra kept pulling back, self-conscious about her scars. But there was something real in it, something honest. When they finally broke apart, she was crying again. I'm sorry, she said. I'm a mess. So am I. Good thing we're both disasters together. She laughed through her tears. This is the worst romance I've ever heard of. Yeah, but it's ours. Xander died on a gray morning, 6 weeks after the arena fight. They were with him at the end, sitting on either side of his bed in the converted cargo container. His breathing had been getting worse for days, each breath a labored fight. Near the end, he reached out with his upper right hand and took Lyra's. With his upper left, he took Jack's. Don't waste time, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Don't wait until you're dying to figure out what matters. I won't, Lyra promised. Teach her, Xander said to Jack. Keep teaching her. I will. The gladiator's breathing slowed, then stopped. His hands went slack in theirs. Outside, a detonation shook the moon. Just another explosion. Just another day on Gratos 9. But inside the small container, something had ended. Lyra sat holding her father's hand for a long time, not speaking, just breathing. When she finally let go, she looked at Jack. I need to leave, she said. Soon. I can't stay here anymore. Where do you want to go? Anywhere. Everywhere. I want to see places that aren't gray. I want to breathe air that doesn't taste like metal. I want to wake up and not know what the day will bring. That sounds terrifying. It is. She stood moving to the door, looking out at the district she'd lived in her whole life. But I think that's the point, being terrified and doing it anyway. Jack joined her at the door. His shoulder still ached, probably always would, but he could move it now, could fight if he needed to, could hold someone if they needed holding. When do we leave? He asked. She looked at him, surprised. We? You think I'm staying on this dying moon? I've got a ticket to anywhere you're going. You don't have to come with me. I know, but you said you wanted company, someone who understands that healing is ugly. He smiled. I'm volunteering. She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to memorize it. Then she nodded. Okay, but we're not running away. We're running towards something. What? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out when we get there. They burned Xander's body the next day, in the arena where he'd been a legend. The crowd was smaller than it would have been at his peak, but still significant. Fighters, gamblers, people whose lives had been touched by the four-armed gladiator. They watched as the flames consumed his body, smoke rising into the gray sky. Lyra stood at the arena's edge, her hand in Jack's, her face composed. She didn't cry. She'd done her crying already in private moments that were hers alone. When the flames died down, she removed the small memorial token they'd placed with her father's body, a simple metal disc engraved with his name and his years. She slipped it into her pocket alongside her own tokens, her own history. Ready you are, Jack asked. She looked at the arena one last time, the sand where she'd trained, where she'd failed, where she'd been carved into something she wasn't, where Jack had bled for her father, where something had ended and something else had begun. Ready, she said. They left Grados 9 on a cargo transport, traveling among crates of ore and machinery. The ship was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was moving away, and that was all that mattered. Jack sat by a small porthole watching the mining moon shrink behind them. Beside him, Lyra leaned against his good shoulder, her scarred face turned toward the stars ahead. Do you think we'll ever go back? She asked. Maybe, when we're different people. And when will that be? Jack thought about the faces in the dark, about the weight of guilt he'd carried for so long, about the moment in the arena when he'd chosen to move instead of freeze, about the slow, difficult work of becoming someone he didn't hate. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe never. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe every day a little bit at a time. Lyra lifted her hand, studying the scars that covered it. My father once told me these scars would teach me that losing has consequences. But you know what I learned instead? What? That surviving has consequences too, and those are harder to live with. She lowered her hand, taking Jack's. But maybe that's okay. Maybe survival is supposed to be difficult. Maybe it's supposed to be beautiful too, Jack offered. She smiled, that small, real smile that he'd first seen in the medical bay. You're an optimist. That's going to be annoying. You're a pessimist. That's going to be exhausting. Good thing we're both disasters together. Good thing. The transport shuddered as it transitioned to faster-than-light travel, and Grados 9 disappeared completely, replaced by the strange distortions of hyperspace. They sat together in the cargo hold, two broken people heading toward an uncertain future, carrying their scars and their histories and their fragile, fumbling attempts at becoming something better than what they'd been. Behind them, the mining moon continued its slow death, grinding down under the weight of corporate greed and human ambition. The arena stood empty, waiting for the next challenger, the next champion, the next tragedy dressed up as entertainment. But on a cargo transport moving away at impossible speeds, Jack Trainer and Lyra, no last name she'd decided, just Lyra, sat together in comfortable silence. The war bracelet was still on Jack's wrist, 53 names reminding him that strength had a cost. The memorial disc was still in Lyra's pocket, a father's legacy reduced to engraved metal. They carried their weights, but they carried them together. And for now, in this moment, traveling between stars towards something unknown, that was enough. The ship hummed around them. The universe expanded in all directions, infinite and indifferent. But in the cargo hold, two people held hands and chose to believe that somewhere in all that infinity, there was a place for them. A place where scars were survival instead of punishment. Where bleeding for someone meant something real. Where the right to choose was more valuable than the compulsion to win. They didn't know if they'd find it, didn't know if such a place existed, but they were looking, and the choosing to look, was itself a kind of victory. The kind that lasted, the kind worth bleeding for.